Been looking forward to someone digging in on this subject because I don't think this is an easy documentary to make, but Pharma Bro is something that I was hoping someone would pursue, and Brent Hodge pursued it. So the backstory on this is the guy who famously bought that Wu-Tang album, got famous, at least in part there, I think more than with gouging people for healthcare medicine that he bought. He became the most hated person in America and sort of leaned into it weirdly. So Brent is going to be on with us here, and thank you for joining us, Brent. So take us through the story as it started. How did you get into this? How did you choose this as subject matter? Because a documentarian is usually very careful about how he chooses.
Yeah, I mean, I watched The Jinx. I don't know if you guys saw that movie about Robert Durst, one that Blumhouse put out.
You got him convicted of murder, correct? By his, well, spoiler alert, but that I just spoiled your documentary, but you solved the crime.
Sorry, it wasn't The Jinx. Wasn't my film. It was a Blumhouse film that they put out. But I was so inspired by that film that I was like, I got to find my own Robert Durst, like who my age is kind of being this guy right now. And it was Skrelly. Like as soon as he bought that Wu-Tang album, everything changed. And I found myself Googling him, and within like a couple of searches, you're already on his live stream and he's recording every part of his life. And I just found it so interesting that there were so many articles and headlines coming out about this guy, but nobody was talking to him, and he was so readily available. So that's how the film started. I just started recording these live streams, and I would call in. He would say, here's my phone number. Here's where I live. Like, ask me anything. And I would just call in, and I got a lot of my documentary by recording 500 plus hours of him just sitting there. And then it developed, and I started meeting his friends and pharmaceutical execs and his lawyer and Wu-Tang. And I started to sort of build a film around that.
What's the story?
The story of Pharma Bro is about the most hated man in America and us figuring out why and how he even got that title. It's kind of an experiment and a delve into the pharmaceutical industry in a sort of weird sliver of pop culture through some young exec who ends up going to jail for requesting Hillary Clinton's hair, and also buys the most expensive Wu-Tang album of all time. It's like it sort of a scary but also funny look into pharmaceuticals and like what's going on in America right now.
What did he do with pharmaceuticals that people will find the most appalling?
So he raised the price of this drug called Daraprim, which it treats toxoplasmosis patients, HIV patients, and he raised it by 5,000%. It's sort of, we dive into this in the film, but it's like a look at the Orphan Drug Act, kind of the loopholes that we have in pharmaceuticals in the US. So that was sort of what got him the first amount of infamy when it came to pharmaceuticals, was his sort of price gouging.
And how could he live with himself doing that? Because not only did he live with himself, the reason he was hated beyond that is he was gloating about it. He was saying his greatest regret is that he didn't charge more, that he didn't gouge more, because it's not gouging, it's business, it's legal. There's nothing governing this.
That was the hardest part. I think that's what people latched onto the most, is this guy was so unapologetic about this. No remorse, no empathy. And that was difficult. You're dealing with HIV patients. You're dealing with a rare disease drug. People, they want some answers, and he's just saying, I would have raised the price higher. I don't know how he lived with himself, or if it was all just a show, but I do know he definitely should have had a PR person behind all this. You look at most drug companies that raise prices, which by the way is very common in pharmaceuticals in the US. Like Martin Shkreli is not a dime a dozen. There's many companies that are doing this. You look at the EpiPen from last year. You look at Questcor. You look at these companies, Valiant. These are big companies doing it, but they don't have some spokesperson coming out and answering questions on live streams. They have PR teams that handle this stuff. So that was his first mistake.
What do you regard as the best of what you got from him by basically just calling into a show where he was just a little addicted to the persona, or addicted to being online, wanted some credit for what he was doing, liked the attention? What?
I think all of that. I also think ultimately, if you really want to break it down, this is about a guy who wanted to be heard, whether we like it or not, or whether we even wanted to listen or not. that's what he was doing. It was a platform where he could actually speak. It wasn't a headline in a newspaper. It wasn't some quote on CNBC or any of these shows from him. It was a true moment where he could sit there and take calls in. He would do it with attitude. He would do it with no remorse still, but that's what I got out of it. Is like, wow, there's a guy here who really just is trying to be heard and we should maybe just look into this a little more and figure out if he is an asshole like the rest of the world says he is.
Do you think he likes being disliked?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I think he absolutely adores being disliked. I think he adores attention. He loves a persona. We really dive into this sort of supervillain-esque persona and understanding the layers of that. You look at films now and how most of our supervillains are not one-dimensional. And that was a lot of my journey to figure out if there's more there. But absolutely, he loves this. He loves the fact that we're talking about the movie that was made about him. Like, this is, he's got to love this.
The best documentaries always tell a bigger story than one person as a symbol. So I'm imagining that this is an indictment of the entire pharmaceutical industry.
Well, I love that you said that, because that's how I jump into these. Is like, if this is an experiment, if this is us diving into the pharmaceutical industry, then Shkreli is one specimen. He's like one example of it. And the hardest part and kind of the learning lesson of this film is that the price of Daraprim is still $750 a pill. Like, nothing has changed to this story of Martin Shkreli. Price gouging still exists. And even that pill for that one rare disease drug didn't change at all.
Explain to us how it happens, though, how he comes into the ownership of something like this, how he buys it or can get it cheap, and how it becomes something that he can then gouge with.
Yeah, there's a lot of loopholes in the system on the Orphan Drug Act, which was signed back in the 80s, which is like rare disease drugs and how you essentially can get the patent for a certain amount of time before a generic is made. And you can raise it as much as you want, hoping that the patients that need it really just get it from the insurance companies. So his sort of argument to it was like, oh, no, if patients need it, then they can get it. I'm really trying to gouge at insurance companies here. They can pay $750 a pill. That said, you see our film, we have a patient in there who there was a crack in the system and the insurance company wouldn't cover him. So all of a sudden he had a $30,000 bill for the pills. And so we explored a lot of different patient stories. A lot of people didn't want to be on camera. I think with toxoplasmosis, like, you're sick or it's not something you want to really come out and say that you have. And so that's sort of the hard part, is like, the Orphan Drug Act and what he was doing is not illegal. It's sadly part of the system, and he's allowed to do it. And a lot of people do it.
What are the parts of your documentary people are going to find most appalling?
That we didn't get to hear the Wu-Tang album probably is the is the number one thing. I mean, appalling. Geez, I think maybe the appalling stuff is more in the drugs, like the idea that our system allows for Martin Shkreli's to exist.
And there's no changing it, correct? This is just you just decided to tell one of the colorful stories, or maybe the most colorful story. But this is a guy that is he not thinking of whatever it is that you're going to put against what he was doing, which is probably some heartbreaking footage of someone dying and going into debt and having their life ruined because this guy is playing with pharmaceuticals like they're toys?
I don't know if he's thinking about any of that. I don't think he's thinking about shareholders in a company. And it's never sort of like our film against Shkreli. There's also an opening to understanding all of his human aspects as well. We travel back to Shkreli, Albania to figure out where his family came from and his name. We kind of go through how he became a pharmaceutical exec in the first place. He's not like an educated, biotech in any way. Like he was in hedge funds and realized that the pharmaceutical industry had like a business to it. So no, I don't know if he's thinking about, clearly he's not thinking about any patient when he's raising the price of these. I think that he's thinking about it as a business choice, which is what really made people kind of light the fire under a lot of people.
Does he have any likable qualities? Any?
For sure. I mean, everybody has likable qualities. I think that maybe some of that power that he has could be used for better. you know, like the sort of like trolling elements online, like you could use a lot of that energy. He's a really smart guy, clearly a smart guy. Like he rose from absolutely nothing to like, you know, being able to afford a $2 million album by Wu-Tang. I do think the album part of things is pretty genius. I think the idea that Wu-Tang was putting out a sole copy of an album because we don't care about the value of music, and Martin Shkreli actually put his you know, his money where his mouth is and bought an album for $2 million to kind of prove that like it's like a painting. This is like a Mona Lisa, and we should have value towards this. I thought that was a great move, but then it just switches by watching him online as he buys domain names for journalists that speak poorly of him. Like it just, for every counterattack, there's something else. But I think there are good qualities. Absolutely. I think we all have good qualities.
Tell us the story of the album. Where is it now? Because he lost it, right?
Yeah, this is where it gets a little like no one really knows. They know that it was forfeited to the FBI because he owed $7 million once he got arrested. So he had to sort of forfeit some things up. Apparently it was in possession of the FBI there for a while, and now they've found a new buyer, but they haven't released the person's name. That person's very smart not to release their name. But who knows what's going to happen with it. It's still unheard. People haven't heard it. I think this sort of mystique keeps this thing going and keeps the story alive. Once it's heard, like, it might not even be a good album. That's what's sort of funny about it all. But talking to Wu-Tang, we have Silver Rings in this, and we have Ghostface in this documentary. Like, that was a huge part for me. I really needed to get them in this film for me to have a well-rounded story.
Explain that to me. Why? What is it that lured you to that part of the story, and what is their place in the story?
I think if it was a documentary about Martin Shkreli, some CEO who raised the price of a drug, that doesn't interest me as much as a filmmaker. Like that alone is like, okay, yes, we should talk about this. There was something that happened when he bought that Wu-Tang album from me, where I just realized, like, this guy exists in pop culture, whether we like it or not now. Like, he has embedded himself in an element of our life, music, entertainment, whatever it is. And it's performance art at this point. And there was something about that moment that hit this other sort of sliver for me. We've got a troll, a CEO of pharmaceuticals who buys this rap album, white kid from Brooklyn. I'm like, you couldn't write this story now. Now it's hit like a weird level. That's what I enjoyed.
And you view the Wu-Tang album as a symbol and an art in the middle of this. It's almost like it's the suitcase in Pulp Fiction. It's better that we not ever hear that album.
My God, that is the best analogy I've ever heard. It's the suitcase in Pulp Fiction. It's this like other weird dangling part of this story that you can't look away from the car crash that is Martin Shkreli, but then you also want to hear the album. So it's this sort of, and he did play 5 minutes of that album, by the way. The day Trump got elected, he was like, I'll play 5 minutes of the album on a live stream. And he did, which is just, that alone too, is just, it's so excruciating, but also funny. It's really funny at the same time. It turns it from being a regular pharmaceutical doc into a comedy, which is what we do. We do comedy documentaries. And I just find it almost gets to this level of hilarity, which is like the world in America is so scary that it's funny at this point.
Excruciating how?
Excruciating in like the idea that an individual can like stir it up so much and like have the ability and power to have any sort of authority over our drug industry. I'm from Canada, and like that's not really how it works with pharmaceuticals and healthcare. So like there's just the idea that an individual like that has no like level of education in this and really just sees it as a business can make those choices for others and their lives. That's what's excruciating.
What do you like best about your film?
What I like best about this film, I think I like that documentaries are growing a lot, and like there's different like categories of documentaries now. Like it used to be like just music documentaries, socio-political, but now there's like a crazy level of true crime. There's comedy, and I like see this as this horror documentary. It like fits in this world like The Jinx, where I sort of can't believe it's real, but it's really happening, and it's it's entertaining and it's funny and it's also really scary. And so I think there's like, separate from murder docs or true crimes, there's like this other sort of sliver. And I'm really excited we tapped into that.
How would you classify it? Because it's, I mean, you do comedies or Freaks and Geeks, that you're aspiring to comedy, but this is not funny, right? And like, this is horrifying. What you're talking about is people dying because they can't afford how commercial the health industry is. Like, the whole thing is apocalyptic on the top end. And where's the funny?
Well, I find that there's like this, I have this term, which is, if you can make them laugh, you can make them listen, which is, there is some comedy to Shkreli. Like, you watch some of the trolling that he does, this Wu-Tang album element of it, my journey and trying to get to know him and move into his apartment building and do all that. Like, this is funny to me. This is sort of a level of troll culture that has some comedy to it. If you can come in on that and then take away a bit of a message to say like, wow, our pharmaceutical industry is totally screwed up. That's the lesson learned. And that is sort of the horror part of it. But, if you want to look at what brings a comedy, you got outrageous characters, you have hilarious storylines and arcs. Like, this has those elements for me that create a comedy. It's just a little bit of a different sliver of a comedy.
Is he an evil genius?
I don't know. Maybe
Genius.
some of the YouTube comments might say that. I don't know if evil genius is the right term for, like, I think a guy that gets put in jail for 7 years for asking for Hillary Clinton's hair when you're on bail and you threaten an ex-senator, I don't know if you can be a genius at that point. Like,
so just evil.
Well, tell us the story of how he ends up in jail and how it comes apart and where this story is right now. And you don't know where the Wu-Tang album is. So
Martin Shkreli went to jail. He was convicted of 7 of the 9 counts of wire fraud. So like he had a wire fraud case against him from the FBI, but he actually was put in jail and his bail was revoked because he came online and said he wants a strand of Hillary Clinton's hair to test for Parkinson's because he was completely trolling her. And that made the judge see it as a threat and said, no, you can't do that. We're revoking your bail and you're going to sit in jail until your sentencing. So he sat in jail for like over a year in like a pretty hardcore jail in Brooklyn too. This isn't a white collar crime case. It's not club fed. He went to a real jail and he sat there for a full year and then was convicted to 7 years in jail. So that's where he is now. So yeah, I like the evil genius line. Like, I don't know. Like, that doesn't seem like a genius move if you ask me.
Your access was from afar, kind of, right? Or did you actually get in his life? It's an interesting veneer to have between you and him, because from what I saw of the screener, it's sort of like almost access to him, or it's access to his internet self, which then allows you to make an interesting documentary.
That's kind of it. Like, I just found that nobody was writing about this guy in a real way or even talking to him. Like, there's no pull quotes from Martin in most of these headlines. You see a headline like AIDS killer. And you're like, okay, cool. There's nothing. There's not a patient that was interviewed in this article. Martin Shkreli wasn't interviewed, although you can literally go online and he live streams his entire life and gives you his phone number and his address. Like, you can ask him anything you want, but they didn't go for it. They got some things wrong. Some articles are saying that he raised the price of the EpiPen. They didn't even get the drug right. I just found like no one was talking to Wu-Tang. No one was talking to people around his life. And I just felt like to get a well-rounded story, we need to go deeper than what I was seeing out there.
It's also a new kind of documentary, right? It's one for the modern age where it's what someone is showing you of their internet life, someone who's addicted to attention. And it's a really cool and different way to make a documentary in the content age, right? You're just like, how is all of this out here for free? You mean I could just hit record and I've got a documentary because this guy's actually giving up the goods, and I'll just call him and I'll interview him in this way on his Instagram Live.
It was really unconventional way to make a film, for sure. And I look at some of the films that inspire me, like Roger and Me, Michael Moore's film's a huge part of that, this sort of quest to find Roger. And like, you look at Exit Through the Gift Shop, you look at a lot of these types of movies that don't take the very sort of linear approach to how we're supposed to tell this, because the regular biopic on Martin Shkreli, is pretty easy to do. You just regurgitate what's in the news. Well, at least you'll get like a form of what you think is a film. But like, does anybody actually look at him and talk to him and try to understand some elements of what he's doing, or at least get an explanation? So that's the journey we wanted to go on.
That's fascinating as art, though, because you end up giving us a truer version of himself than we've seen, going unconventional journalism paths that tell you that the construct that we have in front of us is just a veneer. All you got to do is check in with his accounts, and you will have a better idea of who this person actually is at the center of what is, you know, a giant problem for America. That you know, it's mortifying what you're actually turning into a comedy. It's comedy and a horror.
Yeah, that's sort of it. Like, it's so funny that it's scary. It's so scary that it's funny, or the other way around. Like, but also like his live streams, is this performance art too? Is this just a persona of what we're getting? Like, how do we get even deeper on him? Can anybody understand him? And maybe you don't. And maybe that's sort of the hard point of this, is like, he's the most evil man in America because no one's willing to get to know him, and he's not willing to let anybody get to know him. So it's like an unconventional experimental way to make something extremely entertaining, in my opinion. Like, if anything, watching sort of the downfall of Shkreli is ultimately oddly satisfying and entertaining.
I've been looking forward to this one, Stugotz. Pharma Bro is available on digital platforms today. Thank you, sir. Thank you for making the movie. Thank you for doing it creatively.